Everybody, thank you for joining us today. My name is Greg Ritchie. I am a product marketing manager for the K-12 sales group here at Infobase Learning. Infobase Learning was a previous iteration of us. And today we're going to go over why asking why is important, building inquiry skills to battle fake news. So, full disclosure, I am not credentialed in any way to um, have this discussion. But what I talk about today is a lot of the experiences that I went through in my own personal growth and education, my classic education. I have a Bachelor of Science I have a Bachelor of Science. Um, and my experience is kind of coming up through the education process and kind of where I went on my own after that happened. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is really just what I have experienced and what I hope can help you and your learners um, in your classrooms. Infobase is a company that builds scalable lifelong learning solutions and experiences. So we have content for pre-K through 5. We have content for middle and high school. We bridge into academic. We look into careers, and we certainly exist in the public library market. The idea is that everybody's on a learning journey at their own pace, at their own level, and we want to meet them there. You have different questions as you get older. One of my favorite kind of ideas to go back to is if you read the same book once a year, you would come to it with different questions each time, and you would read the same book, but you would read a different book. Um, so similarly, we like to offer the opportunity to learn these different pieces of information or content or learning pathway modules when you are ready to have those questions, when the learner is ready to kind of go through what they're looking for. As I mentioned, we have content-based information and we have learning pathway type information. So depending on if you're looking to supplement ideas or you're looking to go through preset kind of learning pathways, we have content for you, checking out our Infobase Learning Cloud there on the right or our Media Cloud on the left, which has, I think we're up to like 1 million products now. It's probably more like 35, but database, streaming video, ebooks, e-reference materials. We really cover a lot of great content. So depending on where you're at in your learning journey or students are at, I'm most confident that we have something for you. Why inquiry skills? Why not? Um, Inquiry skills are a fun thing because it's not just something that builds for an individual. Sometimes it's something you can build as a team of individuals. It's something that can not only benefit the learner, but the student and maybe even the curriculum itself, where poking holes in an idea helps something to become stronger. So less like poking holes in a balloon and more like putting holes in the top of a popping bag of popcorn, where one is a solution to let something out that didn't need to be there necessarily, and the other one is just draining the object of what was in it. So inquiry skills and the skill set are more intended to help build and progress an idea rather than break it down. Um, the argument could certainly be made for breaking an idea down to build it back up, but that's just, we're adding elbows to a process. Helping your learners to ask why not only improves their ability to get a foothold in the information, but it also improves your ability to see information in as many different perspectives as possible, right? Like when we work in teams, the idea is that many minds are able to see an idea from different perspectives and add that to the collective process. So building those skills is important for everybody involved and potentially the process at large itself. Um, so as I mentioned, as I kind of came up through my classical education and my own personal self-development, I kind of thought, I looked up 8 simple ways to support inquiry-based learning, and I kind of thought, where in my journey did I pick these things up? And so building an inquiry-based mindset is not something that can simply happen with the push of a button or mentioning it once. It is obviously dedicated effort, and right now with everything going so digital and kind of individual time being at a premium with teachers and learners, building that learning environment is important. Giving the student the ability to look at more information, to collect information in different ways, to make different connections. I'm a Sherlock Holmes fan with the Benedict Cumberbatch series, and he always talks about the mind palace, like associating ideas with things to then connect them to other things more easily. The Goloski cube, the first mention I have there, I had a college history professor that as he taught, he had pictures around the rooms on each of the walls. The right wall had political leaders, the wall in front of us had religious leaders, the wall to the left of us had cultural influencers, whether they were singers, dancers, entertainers, artists. And every time he would mention a quote or an event, or anytime he would kind of need to isolate that individual out, he would point to the face on the wall. And what he was doing is, one, he was helping us put a face to the information. But what I kind of picked up, intended or otherwise, um, what he had also done is staged the faces with context around them, like the periphery around the faces all made sense as well. So when I was taking my exam in that classroom, I would look up to see the face to try to think of something, and I would see people around it, and I would have additional context added to my idea. So build that learning environment, give the learner the ability to break out into other information or make those connections. Create an environment conducive to asking more questions. What else might I not be including? Things like that. Start with students' questions. I tutored for many years in college. I did a bunch of different subject areas. Many years in college. I only went to college for 5 years. I don't want to give the impression of Van Wilder. But I went to school for 5 years. I tutored each of those years. I tutored multiple subjects, not to toot my own horn. I needed money. And they were all classes that I had passed or that I was able to be I can't think of the word right now, where you can just take the class for no credits, but I took a couple classes to learn them effectively with the other students to then help tutor them. Um, my point is that I would get to a point of explaining a solution or an idea or a process a couple times, and it still wasn't making that connection. Over time, I realized that sometimes you just have to ask where the person is disassociating with the actual process. Where are they not making those connections? What's the stumbling block? Sometimes hearing questions up front help you to change how you approach the topic. Maybe all the factual information is there, but the chronology doesn't line up to the individual. Or maybe, learning primary colors, it's kind of something you need a color wheel for. Sometimes simply describing them or explaining them in different ways isn't enough. You have to visibly show them. So sometimes simply starting or engaging your class with asking questions, present the topic. What do we know? What don't we know? What can we learn? What might we be interested in learning? If it's an individual that was a major player in a movement in society, or maybe they're a major influencer in a music industry, or there are major events where individuals play key roles. Starting off with what you don't know and where you're going to wind up sometimes is a nice way to create that vacuum of thought, right? Like nature abhors a vacuum. It always wants to fill a vacuum. So sometimes if you can create the curiosity and then show them how you're going to get there, that vacuum that you've created, sometimes that spark of curiosity might help them to begin asking more questions. Foster that curiosity in your classroom. Mrs. Baylog, start with students' questions. James Baldwin, I love reading James Baldwin, ahead of his time, progressive thinker, progressively minded, really just understood context well outside of where he was in the spectrum of society. I love his quote though, nothing can be changed unless faced. If we don't ask learners what their questions are, we'll never know. Back to my example of being a tutor, I had explained it 2 or 3 different ways, thinking of one in particular math experience, and all I had to do was ask where it was not connecting for them, and that helped me fill in that and move forward. Moving on to next, fostering the curiosity in the classroom. Mrs. Baylog was my high school art teacher, and so she would always challenge us to look at things in different ways. I mean, obviously it's art class, they're going to challenge you to do that, but what she started to create in us was this idea of think out where you want to go. Why do you want to go there? What do you want to portray? What do you want to do? And then she would actually challenge us to move outside of our comfort zones. Have you looked into this? Have you considered this? Change your medium, change your focus, change the perspective. Have you looked at this artist? They do it a certain way. So there's always that ability of trying to challenge where the students are approaching a topic from and helping them expand out. Yes, so there was a question of if we will be sharing the recording out with participants. Yes, everybody who registered for this session will be receiving a recording following the session itself. Um, Be a co-learner with the students. Dr. John Maxwell is a foremost authority in leadership, and he kind of describes with this quote or with this idea, if you always have the answers, at some point you become a crutch rather than a supporting element. Why would I have to go out and learn it on my own if I always know that you're going to have an answer for me? There's an article I linked to at the bottom there that actually talks about if a student asks you a question, as a teacher, you're allowed to say, you don't know, let's look at this together. What that does for the individual is not only foster a sense of um, confidence, pride in themselves, that they are now learning with this teacher, somebody who is for all intents and purposes above them, of a higher status than them. It's something fun to do. You can learn with them, but you're also allowed to walk them through with more questions, like, oh, why'd you ask that? Why did you think that? Proctor them along the way. Be a part of their process rather than starting them off and swinging back later. Obviously, again, time is a premium, and the ability to spend that with learners is always at stress on our days. But where you're able to, I think this is a very effective way to walk through what somebody is learning with them, and kind of again proctor that mindset. Think like think like a scientist by exploring and discovering. What don't you see? So one of the products I'm actually going to talk about today is Today's Science, and we had an asteroid that went through our solar system a couple years back. We did an awesome article on it. We talked about all the science that we learned, all the facts that we learned that were observable directly. What we also did is challenge that information to what we didn't see and can extrapolate from what was missing. What didn't we see? My favorite example of that is as this asteroid passed through our solar system at this crazy angle, coming from a part of space that we hadn't really thought anything was doing major things in. We saw no vapor trail, and we knew the distance from the sun. We knew the speed this thing was moving at, so we could automatically remove certain elements from being present in this asteroid because we knew at the temperature that it was at, being as close to the sun as it was, we should see certain things within a range boiling off or evaporating off, subliming off. So there was all this fun information. If there was a full circle of information that we could know, we had filled in a portion of it with what we could directly see. So the rest was left to conjecture, to asking questions, to trying to analyze what we did and didn't see. So science approaches ideas with a set process. Teaching your students a process to have questions in. Uncle Greg, myself, has personally fallen prey to the why game. And what starts off with, why do I have to eat spaghetti, concludes with the universe is huge and expansive, and I don't know where we're going to be in 20 million years. Where that game is fun in concept, the ability for my nephew to ask why for a solid hour spoke to his curiosity, his level of curiosity, where his mind is at and expanding. Having a more fruitful conversation in a classroom or in a learning environment where why do you think that? Where are you pulling that from? What are the facts you're using? Like coming back with questions, hopefully will foster that idea that they can then answer questions with questions. So is there a process to it? How we're teaching learners to build their inquiry skill set. Think like an engineer. Sometimes, the joke is step 10 feet to your right and look at it differently. You might have a different idea. There's a joke where, and I'll summarize the joke. There are two golfers waiting to get onto their fairway, and there are three individuals that are just hitting balls in all directions. Like there just seems to be no cohesive pattern to what they're doing. And so golf warden comes by. These two guys ask the golf warden why these three gentlemen are on the course or what the deal is, why they're taking so long. And the golf warden essentially explains that they're three blind individuals. And, we kind of give them this courtesy because of things they've done in the joke, blah, blah, blah. And so the one guy who asked the question is okay with that. The other guy, the engineer, asks, why can't we just let them golf at night? It clearly wouldn't affect their golf game. And not making light of, handicaps that people might have, the idea was simply that, are we looking at the total capacity of what can happen here? Helping students think outside of what they might believe are limitations, asking the right questions, testing those boundaries. Engineers are, taught, or they have a talent in looking at what they have to work with and making it the most efficient they can. And so as you build inquiry skills, there are different pieces of that that you can manipulate and use, whether by a talent or through training, to be better at. Whether it's collecting information, whether it's extrapolating that information, whether it's communicating and effectively working with teams to pull through that information. But thinking like an engineer is something that's absolutely valuable, in that your approach is allowed to include outside of the box thinking. I already mentioned this, focus on skill development. Abraham Lincoln talks about when he was younger, he could spend 2 hours chopping wood outside and only make it so far. Or if he would have spent a half an hour sharpening his axe, he may have cut as much wood or more in an hour, taking the time to sharpen his skills. There is a process to having an inquiry-based mindset. Where did we start? Where do we finish? How do we get there? Focusing on those different skills, those different levels of the process, your learners are going to naturally gravitate to them, either, again, because they're naturally skilled in thinking that way or processing information that way, or it's something that they're really driven to learn. Regardless of how you build those individual skills, whether by proctoring or by curiosity yourself, if there are 8 steps and you sure up 4 of them, that makes the whole process easier by 4. So sometimes looking at how individuals learn is super important. Putting them in team environments can also help build inquiry skills, where somebody might be very good at presenting information, looking information up, analyzing information, what have you. Each of those is a skill set that they can either learn by watching or build on their own. And looking for cross-curricular connections. I had mentioned the Sherlock series with Benedict Cumberbatch, where they talk about the Mind Palace and those connections to other things. More of a coordinated effort on the teacher side of things. But if there was a project that conceivably went across departments, where build the story in your English courses, build the math in your math courses, build out the science in your science courses for a collective project at the end of the year. You now have those strings and those strands going out to those different ideas to pull in context, to pull in curiosity. The color wheel is a neat idea, 2D. What would that look like 3-dimensionally? Could you fade those colors to not look so bold, with clear delineated lines? Could you program, could you write a program to show what that would look like bouncing on a pavement? In art class, could you build that object, or could you make that object in different ways? So the ability to start connecting that information across different departments or just subject areas, I think would only add context to it. I really became more ingrained in historical fact as I got older. I'm not sure if that's just a guy thing or just something finally attracted my attention that kind of got me hooked into learning history. But when I was first starting to do a lot of reading, I had read that we live in a privileged age where we have the ability to look back over all this disparate information, over letters that were sent, over actions that were going on that people were unaware of, over events that people were unaware of that now we understand as a total, played out to the entire conclusion of the event or events. And so learning about individuals, learning about the speed of how information could travel at the time, learning about the science that's available, learning about the weather that may or may not have impacted, or the natural implications. There's so many cool ways to look at events. In college, I took a lot of courses on, I took environmental science, so it was a lot of like biogeochemistry. So we were breaking down everything from macro to micro. Looking at the influences and the context and the overall environment that situations were happening within, where as you learn different subjects with your learners, kind of expanding that out to different ideas. So you might be learning about an event in history that you might also look at the scientific aspects of, like how fast could a cannonball fly across a battlefield? You might have students that would be absolutely tickled to figure that out, or how far it could go. How far away from a cannon do you have to be to get out of the way of said cannonball? These are fun challenges that you can put in front of your learners that keep on the topic of, the broad topic of what you're trying to learn within, but again, bring in those other elements of other focuses. World News Digest. So information in context, linear thinking, logical thinking. Our World News Digest actually does an amazing job of this through one feature that I'm going to focus on, basically the ability to go forward in time and back in time to look at the chronology of a chain of events, news as it evolves, because we all know that an article that we read about person X in the news 4 months ago, if they're still in the news, that news is very different today than it was then. The information has evolved, the players have evolved, the events, the circumstances have all evolved. And so you kind of lose some of where did this come from? How did we get here? World News Digest actually allows you to pick through articles, move forward and backward through them to understand that contextual information. When looking at what you need to effectively, leave a history class with, these are the different mindsets that you need to have, like chronological thinking. What was the series of events in play here? How did that all work out? Historical comprehension. How does it play into a bigger context? How does that play into other things that were going on? Analysis and interpretation. What's the information that you have available? Really being able to pick apart the different events as they were playing out, or the different scenarios. Research skills. These are all just different ways of asking questions. These are all just cool, unique ways to apply to history for individuals to build that inquiry-based learning. Where are you getting your information? How are you analyzing that information? How are you interpreting what's going on? Are there human elements that you're considering? The total context, it's the tree falls in the wood. Does anybody hear it? Was there an event that happened that had no repercussions? How did that fit into the overall context of it? And what was a series of events? If the tree would have fallen sooner or later, what kind of impacts would that have had? And play that kind of game as well. So if you have individuals who are looking at this from a historical context, or like a history class aspect, here's some different ideas. I also link to the articles that I pulled these ideas from. Issues and controversies. So this database, the concept here is that ideas have two sides. We label them as pro and con, not to indicate a right or wrongness of the topic, but simply who is in agreement with the situation and who is in disagreement with it. An important aspect of issues and controversies is looking at the debate mentality. We get into debate topics over, I believe, the past decade and a half. We give information to both support and object to the main argument for ideas. Part of inquiry-based learning is helping the individual understand that an attack on the idea is not an attack on the individual. The idea of inquiry-based learning is to help the overall objective grow more. I did not learn this early on in my education, so every time I said something in class, somebody would say something that I took as a personal attack, because I thought they were attacking me with an answer rather than what I was saying at large. So I believe that teaching students how to be ready for criticism, for counter arguments to their ideas, is a part of the inquiry-based learning process. Again, you're helping the individual understand that more can come of an idea from multiple perspectives. Teachers might have to learn that, might be something that a teacher has to hear, that letting your students question what's going on might help the overall process. It might be something that a student in your class needs to hear, that putting your idea out there without thinking it completely through might not be the best approach. What didn't you consider? Did what they object to have a validity, a credibility to it? The value of many people, again, is that many perspectives. And I had to learn later on, I mean, in my early 20s, that it took me a while. I'm a late learner. I had to learn that everything that is said to you can have value. My brother and I have discussions where all the words are not necessarily relevant or courteous, but his point might still be valid. So it's the ability of the individual to sift through the information that's being given to them and objectively look at it, questioning everything that is being said or what I'm thinking about. So our issues and controversies gives students that basis of information if you're looking at issues around the world globally. An amazing product to consider if you're looking into this kind of information. Our Today's Science product, obviously I love this one. I went to school for environmental science. We have individuals who write summaries of critical peer-reviewed essays on science in the news, and they submit them to us, and then we take those writings, and we collectively put them together, and we make these amazing articles that deal with science that's in the news today. We bring in engaging visuals, we include discussion questions. We try to give the ability to the learner to immerse themselves in the topic. What's nice about this is the discussion questions at the end question what's in the article. We have crossword puzzles that help reinforce that information in a different mindset, asking tricky questions to try to get them to think differently to get the words correct. Science is a neat subject in that you can look at it from so many different ways, either where the origin of where this all began, where it could go, the languages that it was developed in, and the influences of those cultures or those countries at that time. Science is just so expansive when you start to get into it. But most importantly, we walk people through these science articles and news stories in a way that allows the individuals that are part of it, scientists that are a part of it, to describe the process that they went through. How did they had a hypothesis, they tested it. What did they learn? How did they evolve the process? Where did they get to? Did they wind up where they wanted to? What did they find out cool and serendipitously along the way? So again, we really try to, again, develop a skill set. How are you approaching your students or your learners with their inquiry skills? Is there a process? Are you building off of a process that you allowed them to develop, to learn from themselves? Is it something that you put in front of them to help them start their own process? If science is something that you teach, I highly recommend Today's Science. Lastly, our info-based learning cloud. This is a pathways and module database. Learn it, do it, share it, prove it. We have a process that we help individuals learn through. We give them the information in the beginning. We challenge them to do the activity or the learning outcome on their own. We offer to share it, put it out there, either to be graded by the teacher, to be reviewed by your peers. This is probably something that's more of a high school AP or educator focused service. Again, the idea of building collectively from your community, from your surroundings, is a very important part of inquiry-based learning. And so this is a nice way to interact with information in a host of different ways, again, through a process to help people walk through learning. Lastly, InfoBase has tons of information and content on our website. This is all free information that you're looking at on our screen. If you go to that infobase.com resources toolkits link, you will find that we are constantly coming out with blogs, webinars such as this one, and other thought leaders that are completely divorced from info-based products, really looking to engage our audiences. Of course, I approach each of these with, did I know that? Could I have learned that? What have I learned from this? There's lots of information to pull through here. We have an amazing 6-part SEL workshop coming up with SEL and Beyond, a group that has presented with us before. They do an amazing job. If you haven't seen those emails or checked that out yet, please register for them. You will not be disappointed. These ladies are incredible. They have dedicated, a lot of effort into understanding their subject matter and their ability to help individuals through a lot of what's going on right now, the trauma of online, am I in class, am I not in class, from a teacher or a student perspective, and how to leverage some of those feelings and things that you're dealing with back into the learning process. So definitely check out these free resources. I would like to thank everybody for joining me today. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reply back to the email that will be following this recording. It will have the recording, as I mentioned. It will have my slide deck here for links to all the articles. We're always curious about feedback. If you'd like to give us any feedback, there's always potential that we might be able to collaborate in the future. We know that we don't know everything, and that's a fun place to exist in. But at the same point, if you have an idea you'd like to discuss, please don't hesitate. Again, everybody, thank you so much for joining today. I'll wait a few minutes if anybody has questions. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day. If you're enjoying lunch, I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And talk to everybody else soon. Okay, we did have one question that said if they were interested in a product, how would they go about getting a trial to it? You can either email me directly at gregritchie@infobase.com or online sales@infobase.com. Um, yes, Paige, we are recording this, and it will be sent to you, the PowerPoint and the other recording as well. So you'll get everything I did plus in an email following the session. Thank you so much for all the thank yous. That's kind of circular, but I do appreciate it. Awesome. Everybody, thank you so much. We're at 12:31. I appreciate everybody joining today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your days. Take care.